What's up, y'all? For the Schlage Deadbolt section of the Residential Locksmith Starter Series, I have come to the realization that it is impossible to get all the information into one somewhat short video. So I'm going to break it up into 2 or 3 different mini sections. So this technically would be like 2.1 Schlage Deadbolts, because there are so many styles of deadbolts, because Schlage is one of the most popular manufacturers for the American market. Schlage has been around for so long. They have gone through so many changes with their deadbolts. So we're, in this video, going to pretty much talk about the differences in them, the common things about them, and then show you the biggest problem with Schlage, specifically Schlage double cylinder deadbolts, when you get caught out to rekey them on a house. Going way back to the very first deadbolts that Schlage had out, they were, I call them the 100 series. I'm not sure if that's correct or not, but they're identifiable because they had these little bent tabs of metal that held the cylinder in. To pull that cylinder out, you could just unbend this and the cylinder will drop out, but there's no reason to do that when you're just rekeying locks. One of the most common signs that that's what you're working with is they had these little 1/2-inch bolts. Nowadays, the latch bolt comes out a full 1 inch, and as you can see here, that's 1/2 inch. So pretty identifiable by having those. Also, the small frame. Back then, you didn't have the cordless power tools to drill and put deadbolts on doors. You were using hand augers. It was much easier to drill a smaller hole, and as such, Schlage in the American market became very popular, and all the subsequent brands of deadbolts, even up to the newest styles that are still sold today on the market, are adaptable for the small hole installation. It would kind of be ridiculous otherwise, because they know somebody has this on the door and they've been looking at Schlage for 50 years in their house and think, I need a new deadbolt. They're more than likely going to go Schlage. Memory. That's one reason why they always stamp their stuff. But it's very common for the small hole, and again, any new deadbolt that you buy, even throughout almost all of the variations, were adaptable to the small hole system. This deadbolt, actually back in probably the 50s, actually only has a screw hole on each side, instead of the traditional double cylinder deadbolt having 2 screw holes. For some odd reason, they did this with outside and an inside screw. The theory was is even if somebody unscrewed the outside screw, it would still be on the door. They couldn't get to the inside to unscrew it. So that's the 100-ish series, which led us into the 160 series. The 160 series and the 460 series were pretty much identical deadbolts, except the 400 was a heavier duty, came with a fatter bolt, and it came with guard shields on the inside of the trim. And again, started off with 1/2-inch bolt. In fact, we have some boxes of them here where they have, as a selling point, the 1-inch bolt sticker on there. Nowadays, of course, that is just standard, but you can see this is the double cylinder 160 series, and you pull it out to find their packing materials, old paper, and the standard B160 style deadbolt. Now here you can see there is the guard rings that come with this. With this and the predecessor, if you're using it on a thin door, the theory was that you would do this, because that'll space it away from the inside more. If you're on a thin door being like 1 3/8, if you were having it on 1 3/4, you would just leave that in there and go just like that. So the 160 series with the new and improved 1-inch bolt was the same thing as the 400 series. However, the 400 series here, 460, had extra metal shields, and it had a heavier bolt. As you can see, this difference between the regular bolt style, you can see that's a much bigger bolt there. So heavier duty bolt, bigger around, actually even had a bigger faceplate as well, and also had the shields on the inside, or the metal shields, still built the same. This one is one of the newer ones, and it had the removable cylinder The other ones you cannot pull the cylinder out. It was part of it, but here you can see the addition of these metal rings on the inside of the trim kind of beefed it up a little bit. So that was kind of the 460 series. Came right out. It was out around the same time. These were actually pretty popular to find on houses. All right, I'm going to make a note here on the handle sets. Around that time, they came out with this dead latch, which is the 250 series. This was available in a deadbolt format where you have a thumb turn on the inside of the door, and they were typically sometimes hold back thumb turns, and if you slide this up or down, basically it locks the thumb turn into position. That way it holds this latch back. These are actually still sold today for gates and such, but I bring this up, we're gonna have a whole separate video on the EB series. They used a deadbolt cylinder with the 2 posts. It was very common to see this on, without those rings, by the way, but that's how it mounted. It's not really a deadbolt, so we're not gonna talk about it much because it was a latching style lock, but this was a very popular handle set for many years, and you will run across them eventually if you're in a Schlage area. So just to point that out, deadbolt cylinder could have been used for an actual deadbolt with just a thumb turn on the inside, or the Schlage EB series handle sets. The 160 series, this is pretty much one of the most common ones that you're going to run across. We have it mounted up right here. Wildly popular from about the 70s to the late 90s, early 2000s. It was pretty much one of the longest running stretches of a design of a deadbolt. We're going to look at all the components when we take them apart to rekey them. Just suffice to say, this was one of the market leaders in Schlage deadbolts. Here is how they used to come in the little red box, B160N. I will take a moment to note, and I haven't yet, the one thing about Schlage is they used a O for the single cylinder that uses a thumb turn on the inside, and they used a 2 for the double cylinder versions. So a 100 would be a 102, that's fictional. A 160 would be a single cylinder deadbolt. A 162 would be a double cylinder, all the way up to the, you know, the 60 series now. 60 would be a single cylinder, 62 is double cylinder. So it's just got a 2 in place of the O. O would be the single, and 2 would be the double cylinder. So that is how they came packaged. Very, very common. Once again, these were adaptable for small holes just by leaving this ring off. These rings were, that was kind of right about the time when the 2 1/8 inch kind of became standard. So you had several different parts and pieces involved with the 160 series. One thing to note about the thumb turns, they kind of started off with those with a sharper, I call this the sharp point thumb turn. The problem with them was they had to send different tail pieces. This is the bar that connects the back of the cylinder to the thumb turn, or going through the latch to activate it when you turn the key. The pointed thumb turns like that had a very low depth. It only goes in that far, right? So they had to send out 2 or 3 tail pieces in case somebody had a thick door, in case somebody had a thin door, because it wouldn't go all the way in. Then they changed it to this round design, so you can definitely tell the difference just by looking at them. You can date them that way, but holding it in that same area, boom, and then, so that way they were able to cut costs by just sending out 1 tailpiece. On super thin doors, sometimes you still had to cut it a little bit, but for the most part, that would work on 1 3/8 doors as well as 1 3/4 doors. At some point around the 2000 era, this hot piece of trash, this deadbolt came out from Schlage. It was the 360 series, and it is immediately identifiable because it had this flared, compared to the more conical shape. It was kind of shorter and fatter, I guess. I don't know how to describe that. More of a chamfered, I don't know how to describe that at all, but this hot piece of deadbolt was immediately identifiable because it used a whole new latch. This is when then things became problematic for the locksmith. As you can see, it did not have its own retainer. With any other latch out there, if it's in, it doesn't come out by itself. It relied on this little pin that's right there attached to the cylinder via some janky mechanism to go through that and basically hold it from just flooping out by itself until you turn the key where it flooped out. These weren't around very long, thank God. You know, in the world of locks, it was like, what, 5-ish years or so before they realized how difficult those were. They were still able to be put on a smaller diameter hole like this, but because of how they were designed, it was very, very super difficult for a double cylinder for the parts to interchange with each other. We're going to be doing a whole separate video on all that soon. And now, which is the current version, which has in itself gone through several changes, one being no more shield like we see here. Again, we've done a separate video on that. Schlage stepped out of the box with a nice deadbolt, coming from what everybody had stopped, you know, recommending the Schlage Deadbolts, and they came out with a whole new deadbolt. It was bigger diameter, so that's the one thing that causes problems when you're trying to retrofit it on a small hole, is their earlier latches were like a 7/8 inch diameter, not much bigger than 1 inch, and this is a full 1 inch. So one of the most common issues you have when retrofitting older locks to this is not the fact that the hole's too small, but it's the fact that the latch hole itself is too small. There is a great drill bit out for that. I'll put the link up here in the corner. We've reviewed it, and I'm using it, and it's working out great for me. But the one thing about this is they did make this a lot better lock, and it's lasted, you know, for quite a while now. It's got the fatter bolt, a little bit fatter. I think they said it was like a 30% increase in size, and the tail pieces no longer come out. You know, they didn't on the 360, but before that you were used to, you know, pulling this out. Now these tail pieces are just attached in there. They don't come out by themselves. A lot less breakage. We don't see as many of them break right here like was common with the 160 series, which was one of its shortcomings. I say shortcomings, but I can't really say shortcomings, because even though some people who have had bad problems with that, typically they only break if the door is misaligned and the bolt does not easily travel. If it's not deep enough and the bolt hits, people force it. If they have a big headed key, any number of things can cause those to break. But given optimal installation, optimal setup of the strike, everything's working smooth, they actually did last for decades and decades without those breaking. So you can't really say it was a bad thing. I will say the adjustable latch, when the 160s were sold, the adjustable latch was not great, and they had a fixed latch, but of course they ran into problems where people were buying a fixed latch version for 2 3/8 and trying to put it on a 2 3/4 back set, and it didn't work. So that's when they changed it to an adjustable latch so that they could just ship out millions of 160 style deadbolts with the correct latch. And that latch was a little, it wasn't as good as the fixed 2 3/8 latch, which was the original latch with it. So one thing about all Schlage deadbolts is the mother effing pins that they sent with them. They have always, even to this day, if you go to the store and buy a double cylinder deadbolt, it will have these ridiculous screw cap pins in the pack. And unfortunately, some people are foolish enough to hammer them into the heads of the screws. So that is the number one thing that you're going to be dealing with Schlage deadbolts, which is why we're doing this separate video. We are actually going to do stuff to a Schlage deadbolt right now. We're going to go ahead and hammer in a couple of these pins, because if you walk up to a rekey and you see the screw heads, Phillips or Allen screws, you're very lucky on a double cylinder deadbolt. If you walk up to it and don't see anything except this little cap looking deal, then you have a problem. And it can be very difficult to deal with sometimes not so bad. And almost always it will scratch up the little bit of an area. So you have to get the cap off to rekey it. There's a number of ways to do it, but basically you have to get up under the lip of the cap and pry it out. They are basically just pressed in. Some people call them rivets. They're not really a rivet. They're just like press-in tabs, and it covers up the screw head so that you can't remove it to rekey, and it always throws a hitch in your day when you run up on them. So let's go ahead and put in some of them in this. Now I will mention there are 3 sizes of those. They go from tiny, which was typically used on these Allen headed screws, and are the worst to deal with because there is no lip for you to get under and pry. It basically just jabbed into the Allen headed screw, exactly the same diameter, and was almost impossible to get out. It was one of the hardest ones to deal with. When the 160s came out, they switched it because the hole is just a little bit bigger, so they went up to a medium size push in. And then when the 360s and the 60 series came out, their bolts once again got to be a larger diameter, so there is a large size. I call it tiny, medium. I call it bitch, medium, and large. Okay, tiny, medium, and large. And the large ones still come with deadbolts when you buy them today. Here we can see the 3 sizes. There's the tiny one, usually in the Allen headed screws. There's the medium, and then there's the large or the current ones. These suck. Here's a close-up look of the press-in pin. Schlage says it's for a beautiful finished look. Now, if you remember in our tools section of the Residential Locksmith Starter Set, I said that you needed a ton of different sizes of flathead screwdrivers, this being one of the main reasons, because you could drill it out, you could cut a slit in it with a Dremel and just unscrew it. Some people say that these things are miracle tools and they'll literally do anything, including make you coffee, and just tap and it comes right out, which is total BS. It may work, but pretty much the best thing you can do, hopefully with no damage, is to pry it out with a flathead screwdriver. Here's one that I'm probably going to go regrind this now. I usually keep one super sharp to try to get up under the lip of it. Now, the main place to go for, the main place that you're aiming for, is where the metal is the thinnest. If you run up on one of these and it's in really nice condition, you can tell here that it's already pretty scuffed up from wear, which is common with the 160 series. But let's just say somebody puts in brand new deadbolts, hammers those pins in, and then calls you to rekey it the next day. You will need to inform them that because of that action, they will have probably light scratches around it. Even if you're going to eat, no matter how careful you are, you're going to have problems with it. At some point, you may just want to decide to center punch it, which is literally this would be good for. Center punch it and drill. These are little metal caps. They're not made of brass. They are made of metal. And you have to worry about the bit, even with a center punch, floating off and hitting somewhere it's not supposed to. Typically what I'll do is sigh in frustration and go grab a couple of little flathead screwdrivers. Let's go ahead and take this off, and that's actually going to be the end of this video because, again, once you get a Schlage deadbolt off the door, it's nothing. They're all the same. It's literally a screw cap style cylinder, and you unscrew the cap and remove the pin and spring, dump it, and put it back on the door, which will be in a whole separate video. So we're going to go ahead and see about getting these guys off, and then go into the next video. Yay! This one, not so much. Yay! So, I think we got extremely lucky on that one. Sometimes you're lucky, sometimes you're not. We had a little bit of damage there, but it can't be helped often. That's why you do warn the customer that, hey, this is going to happen when you do this, and not my fault. It's just something you have to live with. I don't remember if I mentioned the 560 and the 660 deadbolts. The 560 deadbolts were one of those that came long after the 160 was discontinued, and looked kind of just like the 160 series. And then the 660 is also the heaviest duty series out there, typically used for really, really fancy homes or somebody that wants the top security. But most often nowadays, residential doors are made so horribly that there is absolutely no purpose on selling somebody a 660 deadbolt on just a regular wood residential type door. When you step into the commercial, yeah, maybe. But I feel like there's other brands out there that, so I've really never pushed the 660, not saying we don't have them and we're not going to go over them. We will be going over actually taking that off the door and rekeying them. But once again, they all rekey the same once you deal with that problem. Oh, not calling y'all hoes, calling that a hoe. Dealing with that problem is the number one thing that you're going to run up on with Schlage Deadbolts. So stay tuned for the next in this series, and we're going to go ahead and take them off the door and rekey them and go over some of the weirdo other things that were involved with Schlage Deadbolts over the years. Subscribe, damn it.